Hello everyone, welcome back to today's story. On a wind-swept hilltop, a white dress spins in the evening wind while a man finally lets himself smile. At the same moment, in a cold mansion office, his father's voice cuts through the air. This wedding will never happen. Tonight's story stands between those two worlds. If it were you, would you stay with the one you love or with your family's approval? Stay with me to find out, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. The phone buzzes sharply on James's desk, slicing through the soft hum of the office. Spreadsheets, contracts, neat stacks of reports blur as soon as he sees the caller ID. Dad. He straightens, expecting another question about numbers, and answers. Is the branch report done yet? Mr. Sun's voice is firm, automatic. Almost, James replies, flipping to the last page. I'll send it tonight. I didn't call about reports. A pause heavy enough to fill the room. I heard you're still planning that wedding. James's fingers tighten. The paper crackles in his hand. Dad, he says slowly, Diep and I aren't backing away. Not backing away? His father repeats, a cold laugh under the words. You think life is some romance series? That woman is divorced. She brought in a child from who knows where, and now you want to tie our family name to that? James's jaw locks. He makes himself breathe before he answers. You've never even sat across a table from her, he says. You're judging from gossip. Nye's adoption is legal, every paper checked. There are no secrets. She's just a little girl who needed a home. Love and pity don't pay the bills, Mr. Sun snaps. I didn't claw my way up from nothing so my only son could throw it away on a sentimental whim. The words land like a verdict. James presses his thumb into the desk until his nail hurts. I'm not throwing anything away, he says quietly. I'm choosing someone who believes in me even if I lose the title you care so much about. On the other end, his father exhales sharply. You owe me everything you have, he says. Your schools, your position, your future. And you think you get to risk it all because you're in love with a woman who already failed one marriage. If you go through with this, don't expect me to stand there and smile. The line goes silent. James hears only his own breathing and the clock on the wall. When the call ends, he doesn't sit back down. He walks to the window. Outside, the clear afternoon sky has turned a flat, uncertain grey. For the first time, he feels fully what it means to stand between two worlds, the family that raised him and the woman who chose him when the office lights are off. That evening, in the wide living room of the Sun mansion, the lights burn a little too bright for how late it is. Marble floors, high ceilings, heavy curtains, everything looks expensive, and yet the air feels tight. Mr. Sun paces in front of the glass wall, city lights glittering behind him. Mrs. Huyen sits on the edge of the sofa, hands folded, following his steps. This whole relationship is reckless, he bursts out. It stains everything we've built. Does he really think marrying a divorced woman with a child will not drag us down? So now love is a stain? She asks quietly. Her fingers tighten in her lap. We were poor once, remember? We didn't suffer because we loved each other. We suffered because there was never enough money for rent or medicine. He stops and turns, eyes sharp. Exactly, he says, jabbing a finger toward the floor. Because I remember, I refused to let my son walk back into uncertainty. Do you know how fragile reputation is? One wrong headline, one wrong partner, and investors disappear. Everything we have can crack if he insists on this wedding. For a moment, the house swallows his words. The ticking clock on the wall sounds louder than any luxury car in the driveway. Here is something many children as strict parents never hear said out loud. People like Mr. Sun grew up with empty plates and overdue bills. In their minds, marriage is not just love, it's an insurance plan. Someone who has been divorced, who brings a child, who doesn't fit the perfect picture feels like a risk the family cannot afford. It's not that they don't know how to love, it's that old fear still holds the steering wheel. Fear of being poor again, fear of being laughed at. And when that fear doesn't have a name, it hides inside big words: future, family, stability. Without meaning to, that fear becomes a leash around their children's choices, dressed up as protection. Back in the living room, Mrs. Hoyen lifts her eyes to her husband. "You gave him houses, schools, a company," she says, her voice trembling now. "But you never gave him tenderness. You never gave him the freedom to choose the woman who makes him smile like he did when he was a boy. You're protecting the money, not our son." His face hardens. He grabs his suit jacket from the chair. "If he wants to go down that road," he says, each word clipped, "he goes alone. He will bear it himself." He walks out, the door closing with a soft, final click. Mrs. Huyen stays where she is, staring at the empty doorway. For the first time, she whispers into the quiet, "Our son doesn't need more money. He needs a father who is a little less afraid." A week later, James drives out of the city with the windows half open, letting the wind strip away the office air. Diep sits beside him, one hand resting on the folded white dress in her lap. The road narrows, trading concrete for red dirt and trees, until they reach a hill that looks out over the village. "This is where I come when I need to see things clearly," James says as he cuts the engine. Up here, the wind is stronger, tugging at Diep's hair. She tries to smile. "Clearly?" she repeats. "All I see is that I might be dragging you into a war with your father's pride." They walk toward an old tree near the edge. James leans his shoulder against the trunk, watching her fingers knot into the fabric. "Dad isn't going to change his mind soon," he admits. "You were right about that." Diep's voice is low. "I left one marriage already," she says. "I took Nye and walked away. Sometimes I still wonder if I ruined her life. What if one day she looks at you and thinks, he lost his father because of us?" James steps closer until the wind has to go around them. "This isn't a war against my father," he says. "This is me choosing which family I stand with when everything gets loud. I want that to be you and Nye." He takes her hand and presses it flat against his chest. His heart thuds hard against her palm. "I'm not asking you to think about it," he says. "I'm asking you to trust this choice with me. Not later, not when everyone approves. Now." The hill feels very small and very high. Below them, house lights flicker on. Fear doesn't leave her face, but it stands next to something else. The memory of every quiet way he has shown up for them. "Okay," Diep whispers. "I'll walk this road with you, even if some doors close behind us." The next morning, sunlight spills across their kitchen table. Instead of waiting for someone to calm down, James dials his assistant. "I need you to arrange a small ceremony," he says. "No ballroom, just something simple, soon." Over breakfast, he tells Diep, Ni swinging her legs between them. "The longer we wait," he explains, the more chances we give other people to break this apart. I want us to hold the calendar, not our parents. They decide together, a tiny wedding, a handful of friends, and Nee right there in the middle, so she will always know they chose each other and chose her. Later that afternoon, they climb back up the same hill, this time with a rough sketch and a length of string. Under the old tree they mark where friends will stand, where a small table will hold flowers, where Nee will wait with her bouquet. Are we doing this because we're in love? Diep asks, half teasing, or because we're tired of being controlled? Both, James says, eyes on the horizon. But mostly because I don't want our future built on anyone else's fear. Meanwhile, back at the small house by the farm, life looks very different from the marble floors of the mansion. Diep sits by the window with the white dress across her lap, pinning and stitching it by hand. Beside her, Nye hums quietly, fingers busy weaving tiny flowers into a crooked crown. "Mom," Nye asks, eyes on the petals, "do you think Grandpa will come?" The needle pauses, Diep exhales. "Sweetheart," she says gently, "a wedding isn't a roll call for every relative. It's where the people who truly love us choose to show up." Nye goes quiet. At school, other kids talk about grandparents cheering the loudest at school plays. Nye has seen her grandfather only once, from far away, in a sharp suit and a harder face. That day he never looked at her, only at James. Sometimes she has wondered if she did something wrong. Maybe she talked too much. Maybe she held James's hand too tight. In the dark, lying between her mother and James, she has thought, as long as they don't leave, I'll be okay. Now, when she hears the people who truly love us will be there, her small heart makes a simple decision. If Grandpa doesn't come, maybe he doesn't love them as much yet. It hurts, but it doesn't break her. She stands, lifts the uneven flower crown, and sets it on Diep's head. "It's okay, Mom," she says, chin lifting. "If Grandpa doesn't come, I'll clap really loud for you and James. It'll sound like a big wedding anyway." That evening, the mansion feels larger than ever. A cup of untouched tea sits on Mr. Sun's desk. He picks up a framed photo. James as a little boy, missing teeth, holding a plastic trophy, grinning like the world is his. Back then a box of crayons was enough, he thinks. Now I give him a whole company, and he smiles because of a woman and a child I never chose. His chest tightens. His thumb hovers over James's name on the phone screen. For a long second, it looks like he might call. Then he lowers his hand. "Let him be happy a little longer," he mutters, hiding from himself the truth that the smile he did not create is still the best thing he has ever seen on his son's face. Later that night, on the porch of the farmhouse, James and Diep lean against the wooden railing, looking up at a sky full of quiet stars. Tomorrow, they will tell everyone their date. "I'm scared of what people will say," Diep admits, "about you, about me, about Nee." "We can't live inside their eyes forever," James answers. "I don't need Dad's permission anymore. I just hope one day he understands this isn't against him. It's us taking responsibility for our own lives." For a moment, the story turns to every young person watching. In many families, being a good child has been confused with signing a blank page and letting someone else fill it in. But respect isn't the same as erasing yourself. If you are the one who will live with the consequences, you are allowed to hold the pen. Then the voice softens, speaking to the parents who might be listening too. There was a time when you held your child's hand at every crossing. Love meant control because danger was everywhere. But love is meant to grow from gripping tight to stepping back, from "I decide for you" to "I'm here when you choose." If one day your child smiles because of a choice that isn't yours, that doesn't mean you failed. It might mean you did your job so well they can finally stand on their own 2 feet. The last image is simple. On the farm porch, 2 slim shadows stand close together under a warm light. Far away in the mansion, most of the windows are dark, except for one soft square in Mr. Sun's study, a door not fully closed. The wedding may happen without his blessing, but the decision they made together has already become the first sacred ritual of their marriage. If this story touched something in you, feel free to share it and subscribe so more people can find the courage to choose their own timeline. In the end, this isn't just a story about a wedding. It's about who gets to hold the calendar of your life. James and Diep choose a small hill, a simple dress, and the courage to stand in the quiet without every blessing they wished for. Mr. Sun chooses distance for now, but even in that lonely room, his love slips through in the way he can't quite close the door. Maybe you see yourself in the son, the daughter, or even in the fearful parent trying not to lose control. If this story stirred something in you, please like the video, subscribe so you don't miss the next chapters, and tell me in the comments which moment hit you the hardest: the flower crown on Diep's head, the father with the old photo, or the 2 shadows on the porch.